Okay, I'm going live right now.
Good. Here
Yeah.
we are.
Yeah, and I definitely intend to continue doing this series. And I think
Hmm.
Wednesday is a relatively good timing because when people's life go back to normal, I think people can still afford a Wednesday night kind of just listening to new music.
Yeah. Yeah, I fully agree. Absolutely. I think it's good because your network really spreads out all over Asia, Europe, the US, right? And even further. So if this, people get more and more aware of that, I'm very sure this can be some, like an institution, as we would say, it's very clear Wednesday evening is the thing, you know.
Yeah, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should be live now. I'm just going to start sharing it at different places so
All right.
people can see.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good. I'll see that. Okay, I'll also tell a couple of people that we are
yeah.
live.
And I have I think guests in August all lined up, so that's pretty exciting. And
Good.
hopefully we can kind of expand into different areas. Maybe not just purely on Western contemporary hardcore
Mm.
avant-garde music, but like next week I have a composer of video games, and
Super. Yeah.
that's also a very interesting area to look at. That's usually not spoken so much, especially in the conservatory setting. In the more
True.
academic and kind of serious with yeah. But I
Yeah.
think
True.
that's really interesting. Just to look at musical activities all over Asia and the sheer diversity of what's going on.
Yeah, and there's a lot going on. Oh God, it's very often when people from outside, from Europe especially, when they ask me, so what is going on there? And
Hmm.
I always feel like telling them, we have 3 hours. Let's sit down and have a coffee because there are so many things going on in the region. It's just not. There's a little bit of lack of awareness outside of Southeast Asia.
That's I think that's one reason why I wanted to do something like this because I
Hmm.
think that a lot there can be a lot more spotlight being shined on what's going on in this region, and even for myself because I really don't know. And coming back to Singapore maybe just last year, now I'm just so kind of a frog in the well, looking out
Yeah,
and discovering such a wealth of activities going on.
yeah, that's true. Yeah,
Yeah, great. I think if we see some people joining in.
that's
Um,
great.
Joey, moin moin, and Septian, hello, hello there.
Ah, I have to be very precise when we talk about Dwitunngal. Otherwise, the boss will comment.
And hello to Kevin as well. Great, maybe we can just get started
Yeah.
with today's episode. Okay, so maybe I'll just give a short introduction. So, good evening, and thank you all for tuning in to episode 15 of Unboxing New Music. My name is Boon Hua, and the concept of this show is to introduce and have a conversation with some of the finest composers and performers based in Singapore as well as Asia on contemporary music. Each episode will feature 2 or 3 works that we listen to together with the score, and I hope you will find something interesting about how the score looks in relation to the music. The live component of the show allows for real-time audience interaction, so I highly encourage our audience to let us know that you are there and are excited about this show by saying hello, sharing your thoughts, or asking questions. So without further ado, I'd like to bring our guest for tonight. He is a German percussionist based in Malaysia with a focus on contemporary percussion and experimental music scenes in Southeast Asia. He served as percussion faculty at the Conservatory of Music in Lugano and gave masterclasses and workshops all over Europe and Asia. Since 2015, he decided to make Malaysia his new home when he was appointed as Director of Percussion Studies at Universiti Teknologi Mara, UITM, and has been very active in new music scenes all around Southeast Asia. So please join me in welcoming Max Riefer.
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening to you. It's been so long since we last saw each other. Is that
That's
crazy? It was
true. That's true.
almost half a year ago, right?
Yeah, it
It was
was
February, I believe.
beginning of March when
Beginning of
Dieter Mach
March.
was in Singapore. Yeah.
Yes, that concert I remember very,
Yeah.
very well. So, I mean, I know you already talked about how you got interested in new music in your bio, but maybe you can just share a little bit about, to our audience, how you got started in that. And of course, percussion is such a, you know, diverse instrument. So, can you
Yeah.
let us know some of your influences as well?
I think, when you start playing percussion as a young boy, I was 6 years old when I wanted to play drums, right? This is what you want to play. I listened to my dad's Genesis LPs and I wanted to play this drum set thing. So my parents were extremely supportive of that. And I was very, very lucky to be under a teacher who was also classically trained, orchestra, percussion mostly, but we did a lot of chamber music and we played small solo pieces of multiple setup and marimba and all that. So that sort of was the base for my interest. And from there, I took part in a few youth music competitions. I became member of different youth orchestras, like the National Youth Orchestra of Germany. And that's where I met my professor, Bernhard Wulff. So Bernhard Wulff is a known guy, and especially he is known for putting a lot of focus on new music, So when I started studying there, I sort of had this idea, okay, I still want to become an orchestra percussionist, which he can teach. And there are teachers like Tajiro Miyazaki, timpanist from Basel Symphony Orchestra. So still, you can learn how to play orchestra percussion there, what we all had to, but we also played a lot of new music. So I remember before my first semester, we had a meet, which in Germany starts in October. So we met in July and we sat around a table in the cafeteria there. And Bernhard Wulff started talking about this project in China in the next semester. And I listened only with, half, because I thought, well, I'm semester one, So, and then he kept talking, very interesting. Yeah. And then suddenly he gave me the score and I took it and I looked at it and there was this name written on it, Yanis Xenakis, Persefasa. I opened the score and I was like, what? And stupid me, I was like, what is that for? And he was like, didn't you listen? That's for the China tour. And I was like, okay, all right. And I remember I called my mother right after this meeting, cute, like an 18-year-old boy. Mommy, I need to practice over summer. We have to cancel all vacations. So that's how it started. That's how it started. And then, yeah, so this was sort of my opening to new music. And this went on through my studies. And then why Southeast Asia? This has also to do with my professor, Bernhard Wulff, who brought us on tours with the percussion ensemble of the university to Vietnam and then later Laos, Cambodia.
Is it one tour, like the China tour together with Southeast Asia, or different?
No, different tours. So
I
was
guys are
so
busy.
lucky. Yeah, I was so lucky. I had huge tours almost every year. So it was year 1, China tour, year 2, Mongolia, year 3, Vietnam, year 4, Laos, Cambodia. Yeah,
I'm
so
jealous.
that was really intense. But also, and then Southeast Asia also has a lot to do with Dieter Mach, a German composer who we worked with together in March. He brought the contemporary music ensemble Selisi, who I was the percussionist of, to the Philippines, to Manila in 2011, to the Manila Composers Lab, organized by Jonas Bais and his team. And that's where I met people such as Keong Chong, Ikao, Iwan Gunawan, and Jonas Bais, of course, as he was there. And then at that time, that was 2011 already. So I understood I have to do some networking. So I was, hang out with these guys, show me your music, the normal thing. And then they invited me. And since then, I've been coming back to Southeast Asia, or then in 2015, I moved here. Yeah.
So you already established, you already established kind of relationship even during your student days.
Yes.
And that's really important. I mean, like I keep telling the students, especially at YST, that, don't think that your career begins when you graduate. No, it begins now. It begins when you enter the conservatory.
Absolutely.
And this is where you you deliver good work, and you build your reputation from here.
Absolutely. Yeah, networking is an extremely important thing. You have to be smart about it. If you go everywhere and, give people your name card, hey, call me, hey. Of course,
Yeah,
people will
yeah.
ignore you, but
Of
you have to
course.
do this in a smart way. And I really think you're absolutely right. Students have to learn how to do networking as well. So that's why they should do it while they are students. Go to festivals. That's what I always say. Go to festivals, go to concerts, be in touch with people. You never know what it's good for.
Right.
And it's not only in that sense what it's good for, like, one day you might get a gig, but also there will be suddenly friendships, and
Which lasts a
then
long lifetime, especially
exactly
with musicians. This is really
true.
so special,
Yeah,
especially in this scene, because it's so small and it's always the same few people. But when you do good work, people remember, and that's always a good
yeah,
thing.
true. Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah.
We started off on the right page.
Yes, exactly.
Fantastic. And so when you moved to Malaysia in 2015, were you already looking at all these various regions? Why particularly KL?
KL was because I got the job offer. I had another job offer before that, with another university also in the KL area, that didn't work out for many reasons. But then, talking about networking, I was in at the time when it was already clear that with this other university it doesn't work out. I was in Birmingham at the conservatoire, and I gave a masterclass there. And in the same hotel was also Tazul Tajuddin, Malaysian composer. But I didn't know that he was there. He didn't know that I was there, but we knew each other. So I went to have breakfast in the morning, and suddenly Tazul was sitting there. And he looked at me, I looked at him, like, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? The typical thing. So we started talking, and then he suddenly said, hey, I heard rumors that you are interested in moving to Malaysia. I said, yeah. And then he said, that's good. You should apply, because we at UITM need somebody for a percussion teacher, right? Like a director of percussion studies. And that was the reason why Malaysia. But for me, actually, right from the beginning, it was very clear. I cannot only look at Malaysia. I think when you live in Southeast Asia and you want to do new music, you have to look at the whole region.
Absolutely.
Because as we know, in Europe, you have these very strong scenes in Germany, in France, in England, in Italy. There are always, everywhere there are festivals going on, and they have these ensembles. And here in the region, it's strong, but not that strong yet. So I think it's
Right.
very important to have a broader view on these things. So
Absolutely.
that's why I said I can live somewhere in KL, for example, but I want to look at what's going on in Bangkok and Singapore and Jakarta, Jakarta.
And everywhere is so close. Of course, you have to fly. Not like Europe. You can just take a train. You're there in a few hours.
But I don't want to mention a certain airline, but you have these airlines that are affordable.
Yes.
And then it takes like 2 hours. And from Singapore to Jakarta, it takes 2 hours. Singapore to KL, 1 hour. It's not far, right?
It's not. No, I've taken Scoot from Singapore to Berlin, and it's not fun.
No, that's not fun. That's true.
No, 8 hours on a budget airline, it's can be pretty rough.
That's true. Oh yeah, Scoot, but also there's we have to mention the others as well, right? So there's also Air Asia and Tiger and Malindo and all these other.
Yeah.
But for a 2 hours flight, it's all right. Yeah.
Yeah, 2 hours flight, it's doable. Can you maybe talk a little bit about, since we're on the topic of various new music scenes in Southeast Asia, can you talk about what kind of like infrastructures were kind of already present, for example, in Malaysia or in Indonesia? Was there already many universities kind of churning out composition students, or was it still rather sparse? Like, for example, Yong Siew Toh is pretty new in the scene. It's been maybe 15 years or so.
Correct. Yeah. I think when we look at Southeast Asia, it's very difficult to give like a narrative that fits all.
Absolutely.
So you have schools like the College of Music in UP in Manila, which turned 100, I think, 3 years ago. you have these Indonesian institutions that are 50, 60 years old already. And in Malaysia, this whole thing started a bit later. Also in Thailand. I mean, of course, you have old university, but it's always the question, or universities. But then the question is, when did they start their music programs? So
right.
I think what is actually in common, though, or what have these different infrastructures have in common, that they are mostly composers led. It's usually composers who are, teach composition, but then they also say, well, but we need musicians who play that music. So they also start a new music program or a festival, or they form a composers collective. So that's maybe the I would say common denominator for whole Southeast Asia and each country. Other than that, I think, as you're right, Singapore, I mean, Yong Siew Toh is just 15 years old. So when we look at
I hope I got that right.
or maybe 20, but no, maybe 20.
I hope I got the number right. I think
so,
I think it's 15. I might be wrong.
Yeah, no, it's something like that. So whoever is from Yong Siew Toh now present, please let us know. Yeah. So
anyway.
But you see, I mean, well, I mean, especially in the Philippines and Indonesia, because the music education has a bit of longer history in this academic context than in Malaysia or in Singapore. And that also means you have a bit more active, or you've had a bit more active scenes. Oh, I get some light here. Thank you very much.
Suddenly your face glows.
Yeah, thank you. that was my wife. Thank you, Rachel. That also means you in these countries you've had like a bit longer history of composers being active in composing new music. So, however, these days I can really see that in all these different countries you have many composers who are extremely active. I mean, it would be absolutely wrong to say in Malaysia there is not much going on. I think it's completely the opposite. There's a lot going on in Malaysia. But again, it's very often because composers initiate something. So it only slowly gets more and more that also musicians initiate something. We always talk about our contemporary classical music.
Right. I was just thinking about, I mean, when you say composer-led, as opposed to performers leading it, right? Because composers, I mean, I still find, especially in this region, to have performers who are really dedicated to contemporary music, it's still a rarity, not so...
True.
Yeah, but hopefully that's going to change. And actually, I'm sure it's been changing, especially with the amount of people who studied overseas and coming back, and they are much more open to and more receptive to all these techniques that are that don't necessarily produce a beautiful sound, to say the least.
Although what is beautiful, but
what is beautiful, absolutely. So maybe with that, I think it's a good segue into the first piece for tonight. And I want to make sure I got the name right. This is Septian Dwi Cahyo.
Septian Dwi Cahyo, yes.
Cahyo, oh my God, Cahyo. And Dwitunngal. Dwitunngal. Yeah, I really need to work on my bahasa.
Yes.
And can you tell us a little bit about this piece before we play it for the audience, and then we can discuss a little bit about some of the ideas he was exploring?
So Dwitunngal is a percussion duo piece, and you see, I mean, later when we have a look at the score, you will see that, or now we can even have a look at the score.
Yes, we can do it right now.
It's fantastic. So you have, so each player has a multiple setup with different instruments and a melody instrument each. Well, player, I don't know, like one has the marimba and two has the vibraphone, right? So, but you see also the use of these melody instruments. It's not really like to play melodies and stuff. There are chords played or short motifs that actually in that sense also have more the character of a color, of an instrument color. Dwitunngal is means basically, well, it's a term from Indonesian, that sort of means like two things become one. And the way how he gets that is through a lot of complementary rhythmic structures. I think this is what we can see in the score.
Yep.
And then as a performer, as also Septian writes specific instruments, but then while we were talking on the piece, while we were working on the piece, we were talking to him, and he also said some instruments can be replaced. I think it's very important in order to get this two things become unity idea. It's not only important to have the whole thing rhythmically extremely precise, but also to choose the instruments in a precise way, that also the sounds really become one. So this is one of the, I think one of the general things when we talk about this piece, which is interesting to listen to. I think we should listen to it.
Shall we listen to it first?
Yes, exactly.
That's always good. Let the music do the talking.
Yes, correct.
Okay, here we go. Cool. I'm really struck by how melodic it sounds, and how
Yes.
it's you can hear the phrases, you can hear how each and obviously at the end, he writes very, very obvious. Obviously the two voices come together, it becomes
Yes. Yeah.
much tighter.
Hmm.
um can can you tell us a little bit about why you chose this piece? What about this piece that really struck you?
So, well, first of all, this was by the way, a recording. I mean, I play, but also Kyla Kunzius plays, who is, well, American percussionist living in Hanoi, playing there in the orchestra, who is a very close friend of mine and also a fantastic percussionist. So when I saw that Septian has published a new percussion duo, it was like instantly, I want to play this because I mean, I've heard of Septian. I knew a little bit of his music at that time, but a lot of people recommended him. A lot of people who I highly value, such as Dieter Mack, for example, he said that's one of those. So I said yes, and I want to play this with Kyle. And this is something very important to me whenever I play chamber music or whenever I see pieces. I cannot just say I play this piece and I find someone. For me personally, I really have to know. With this person, I can play this piece. And I mean, I looked at Dwitunngal, and for me, it was very clear this is something for me and Kyle. So why this piece? I think, well, first of all, this is something very important to me. As you said, it's very melodic. It's not only the way how we choose the instruments, it's also the way how he writes it, of course. And this is something that is very, very important for me as a percussionist, as a teacher, as a performer. I always try to tell my students, look, I mean, you hit this thing once, but that is not it. I mean, we have to form phrases. We have to shape melodies. Otherwise, percussion can be super boring if you just had like
Yes.
So
Right.
for me, this idea of like you hit something that is actually usually a staccato sound when we talk about drums, medium size or high pitched drums, or high pitched woods and stuff. But then how to combine it that they become a melody, that they sound legato. So
Absolutely.
this is something as a performer is super, super important. And I think in this piece, it's I think it's a great example of how you write already like this, and then as a performer, you bring it out, and then you really hear like it's a string quartet playing almost, right?
Is it common? Because again, I don't know the percussion repertoire very well, but it's common for percussion pieces using all these assorted instruments to have this kind of melodic shape to it. Because of course, when you play on marimba, there's definitely this kind of line. But when you talk about having different instruments, and I remember the first time I've learned something like that is definitely from Unsuk Chin's Gugalon.
All right,
And
yeah.
I remember the movement with the glass bottles, and I remember telling the percussionist, you have to phrase it, and at first she was like, huh? Ding dong ding dong ding, and she starts to realize, oh wow, I can really make phrases even with sounds, any sounds.
So this is something, I mean, maybe not each and every piece requires that. Of course, you might have pieces where you need something like very staccato and separate, of course. But in general, for me personally, whenever we play multiple setup pieces, we always have to try to sing, to phrase. I always tell my students, play like a wind instrument or play like a string instrument. Otherwise it gets boring. As you said, it's like tukaki kuka. Okay, but if you do dati pitopu, it's it's
a
phrase.
question,
it's like a
or
singing.
becomes a statement.
So, I think this is a very important approach as a percussionist that we should have in general. And in Septian's piece, I sort of found how to say this in English. I found a playground for this kind of playing.
Right.
So that was maybe one of the most important reasons for me why I choose. So why I decided to play this piece and why I choose it for tonight, because I think it's a great example for young composers. I hope Septian, it's okay if I call you young. I mean, he's not 17 years old, right? But for one of this younger generation composers who has a very unique language of composing, already very strong developed individual style, and also somebody who has a lot of good knowledge and idea of percussion instruments.
Right. So, absolutely. What I find really interesting is at the beginning when both of you played, it was two distinct voices. And it never at one time sounded like it was mixed together. It was it was very obvious where one line is and the other line is. And eventually when it came together, then he served that purpose of putting it together. I just wanted to talk a little to ask you a little bit about so there are kind of two versions of this piece. And maybe we can look a little bit at the score of the first version, and I'd love to get your insights about this. So I guess in the first version, the score is much more spread out.
Yes.
And how does that look visually for you as a percussionist?
I would say it that way. If I wanted to have a look at the piece and try to understand the piece and maybe analyze the piece, in a way that's better because the voices are so separate and I can really understand what because it's not just two percussionists. It's also there are these voices within these different voices within one player, right? When we see it now in this, you can see it almost looks like like an ensemble, like two ensembles playing. But of course, when you perform the piece on stage, there are a lot of page turns. So my dear friend Kyle was the one who said, "Hey, I would love to rewrite that." And I said, "Okay, why don't we ask Septian if it's easy for him? Maybe with the software, it's easier for him to combine that than just rewriting it." And Septian was very, very helpful and said, "Yeah, no worries, I can do that."
Great.
And so then why is there version 1, version 2? Version 1 has the original instrumentation of the premiere. But as I said, Kyle and I had thought for some parts, like for example, there are the cowbells, the Almglocken. I somehow thought that using three different bonang, helps a bit more with the resonance character of the piece. When you take the cowbells, I mean, the resonance of a cowbell is beautiful, but shorter than bonang usually. So I thought it helps a bit to have a bit more resonance. Otherwise, even though I said before, the piece is very, in a way, the way how it's written is very melodic and all that, you can have a bit too much attack in the piece. So that was one of the things we suggested. The other thing was in the first version there's a triangle, which is a bit tricky to play when you have all these instruments and then suddenly there's a triangle and you need to play the triangle with a metal beater. All these options with the drumstick and so on is horrible. So, and then Kyle had this idea, let's use an ice bell, which is a small, thick cymbal. So we replaced it, of course we asked it, and he was fine with it. He actually said, yeah, that's nice, I like it. And then I said, look, but on the other hand, we sort of interfere a little bit much with your original composition. So if you feel more comfortable, let's just call it Dwitunngal Dua or 2. So that the original piece still exists and the second version is just our, like the thing that we made out of it. That's the reason.
Right. And also I think in the program notes as well, I think in the second version, I think he says that you are able to substitute some instruments.
Correct.
And it was a more conscious effort to make it a little bit freer, but he still keeps the first version of it intact.
Yes. And I mean, and that's what I mean. The choice of instruments is so important for percussionists. When you have this, I mean, it says snare drum, but what is a snare drum? Or it says cymbal, but what kind of cymbal? So we have to put so much thought into choosing the right sounds, and the right sound is not like a right sound for everyone. It's, I have a preference, other people have a preference, and depending on what cymbal I use, I have to choose the right tom-tom or the right triangle or the right bass drum or whatnot. So I think, having that said, with his program notes and Dwitunngal Dua, I think it opens the piece up for much more interesting or many more interesting versions in the future, because the next duo who plays this, they have maybe even crazier ideas. They would go even a bit further from what is written already, and why not? I mean, the piece is so strong that the piece can totally do it. And as we know, it's not a new thing. Yeah, and as we know, it's not a new thing to say I write a piece and it can be played by different instruments or different instrumentations, right? So this is a super old idea. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I just said
Sorry,
something.
maybe I talk too much.
No, not at all.
Machine Gun Max.
Oh, I was going to ask you about, you mentioned about the kind of the snare drum, and everybody has different preferences for it. How would a composer be able to notate what he wants better in terms of percussion, in terms of instruments?
I think it's very important that a composer describes the sound, not the instrument. So one of the common mistakes is large and small cymbal. So what the composer most probably wants is like a low and high pitch cymbal, right? But I can bring you a super large cymbal that has a very high sound, and I can bring you a small one that has a very low sound, because it also depends on how thick the instrument is. So I think as a composer, it's more important to describe the sound that one composer want to have, and then so let's say if let's talk about snare drum. If it's really important to have a super high pitched snare drum, very dry, maybe even damped, then that's what should be written in the preface, right? But if you just write snare drum, then somebody might come with a nice, German orchestra drum that has like a very low and sort of earthy sound. Yeah, that's also a snare drum.
And something like earthy, adjectives like this, or are these kind of helpful for the performer? Because it's not definite, but it's kind of open for interpretation.
For me, it totally is. I think as a performer, we always have this responsibility also to try to understand what the composer wants. I mean, of course, there are limitations to that. But if let's say it says earthy sound. Okay, I mean, there's no definition for earthy sound, but I mean, if you think for a moment, you can sort of know what the composer wants. So it's very obvious it cannot be like the super high pitched 12-inch snare drum, right? So I think it's all right, because I mean, it's music, it's interpretation, it has to be alive. It's not like a mechanical or technical thing, So and I think as a composer, they all know if you write these kind of things, the sound might be a bit different than you initially intended, but if it's within a certain range, it also gives this performance a personal interpretation.
Great. And maybe with that, we can kind of pivot into the second piece for tonight.
Yes.
Which is Tony Prawobo. Oh my God.
Prawobo. Yes.
Prawobo's opera Gandari. And perhaps you can also, maybe it would be interesting, since you're kind of an observer of how the scene there, are there any kind of generational differences between kind of a younger generation of composers from Indonesia and someone that is like a kind of a important, influential composer?
Yeah, I mean, also here it's a bit difficult to just generalize. I think what we see though is a lot of younger composers have, they've been having it much easier to get in touch with, I don't know, other scenes or repertoire and so on. I just imagine, I don't know, like
the ease of information, right? I mean, it's so easy to be connected, whereas 40 years ago you can only go to Germany and learn from that one teacher.
Yes,
I mean, the way
that, or I mean, getting scores and getting recordings. And I mean, when we talk about Indonesia, of course, I know that in Jakarta they had like all these collections and stuff like that of recordings. I remember at Tony Prawobo's home, there's this wonderful collection of LPs and CDs and whatnot. I mean, of course, that's not somewhere behind the moon, as we say in German. But of course, today it's much easier to get all these kind of things. Mm-hmm. I think, my observation is that a bit younger composers always carry this question of identity with them. Elder composers as well, but I also have a bit the feeling that the more senior composers, or the ones who are not the very young, in the very youngest generation anymore. How do I say this without sounding condescending? They seem to care, or I know of them, they seem to care less about this. What is my local heritage? Interestingly, in a way, sometimes I feel some of them are even more revolutionary in that sense. Although and among these younger composers, I mean, as you see with Septian, for example, I mean, he talks about, I think that's in the score.
Gamelan.
Yeah, it was like to these gamelan forms, and and I see this in a lot of young composers in Indonesia who ask similar questions, like what are my roots, what is my identity, and so on. Which is definitely interesting. I personally think that what we do is contemporary music or new music. We don't need a national label for that, because when we look at, let's say, Germany, what is German contemporary music? Is that Lachenmann or is that Stockhausen? I mean, they both are, but there are also so many others we can look at, and they sound very, very different.
But there's a certain lineage, right? I mean, of course, to generalize, but there always seems to be this idea that there is a composer tree, for example.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, I think that's why it's probably interesting now when we look at the next piece, which is so different. I mean, for so many reasons. I think let's listen to a few excerpts.
Sure.
It's too long to play the whole thing.
So we jump to the first excerpt. Let me pull out the score. Maybe before we play, can you just share with us a little bit about what the opera is about? I know it's from a traditional story or a legend.
Yeah. So it's Princess Gandari is taken from the Mahabharata epic. Gandari is the reincarnation of Mari, if I'm not wrong, and she is the goddess of wisdom. And in her human form, she's married to the blind king,
Hastinapura.
Destarata. Yes. Yeah, exactly. And he's blind. And so the story goes on and on. I don't want to tell the whole story now, and actually I should have probably know a bit more. It's an epic, yeah. But the lyrics for the opera is based on Gunawan Muhammad's poem. So he wrote a poem, Gandari, and this is what the libretto of the opera is based on, or what it is actually.
Super. Let's just listen to a short excerpt.
Yes.
Ombak seakan-akan mati, air menahan mereka.
maybe until here.
It's quite a lot to unpack.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is what we do tonight, unboxing. No,
Absolutely.
I mean, isn't this is so beautiful. It's so intense. It's so, how do you say, sensual? Is that a word? It's so, for me, it's so physical, this music.
Mm-hmm.
And it's extremely dense, obviously. But also when we see how we compose this, we have a lot of these unirhythmic or unison things between different parts. But then we have these layers and all that. I think we could see this very well. So it is extremely intense, extremely dense, yet it is so full of detail that well played. When it's well played, this was well played. This was unfortunately not the recording, our recording from last December when we did this in Jakarta. This was from Ensemble Modern Academy. I mean, no doubt they're fantastic musicians as well. When it's well played, it's not overwhelming, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's massive, but it's never, you don't feel like a truck is running over you or something. Because sometimes in your music we have that when it gets very loud and intense and all that. But here we have all these very sensitive, small details in it.
Right. It's very clear.
Yeah, exactly.
And also extremely difficult because of, it's all in unison and everything has to be very, very precise. Especially, I can imagine the intonation, the strings. It must be really difficult to.
It is extremely difficult. When we did this last year, I mean, that's why I chose this piece, because I was a bit involved in this production last year.
Yes, please tell us about your.
So I was the assistant conductor to the chief conductor, Peter Wiel. I can't say enough what an amazing musician and also a great human being Peter is. So I was very, very lucky to be his assistant. So what my job was, I went to Jakarta or Yogyakarta a couple of times during 6 months, almost like I think every 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, to do the sectional rehearsals. So we had string sectional rehearsals, we had brass sectional, wind and brass sectional rehearsals. And I remember at the beginning, the very first string rehearsal we had. I don't know if Neam. Oh, yeah, Neam is here. Yes, so Neam is the cellist of Seon String Quartet, which is Seon String Ensemble. Neam, I hope I say this right, from Yogyakarta. Fantastic musicians. But I remember after the first rehearsal, we all went out. Like everybody was a bit scared. I didn't show it that much because I mean, as a conductor and coach, you can't show that. But I told them, I saw on the other hand that they were really into it. They were enthusiastic about it, maybe a bit shocked, maybe a bit scared. I think some of them even said like, gosh, how can we do this? And I said, stay calm, we will get there. And that was one of the most important sentences throughout the whole 6 months preparation. But and then Peter Wiel came once to Jakarta, and then we had I took care of the percussionists, and
were you playing as well?
I was playing as well. Yes, so
okay.
I was coaching 3 guys, and I played the 4th part. And then so he came and he did some rehearsals for 5 days, and then at the end of November we met for 2 weeks, and then of course Peter took over as the chief. And I do remember this first rehearsal, and it was this moment when you feel like, yes, there's a lot of work to do, but it will be good. And I think what we accomplished musically as the ensemble, but in all fairness also, there was a fantastic choir and great dancers, great actors. So, what we accomplished is a great example for an extremely difficult task. Maybe at the beginning it looks too difficult, but if you're really into it, if you really put a lot of work and effort into this, then you can go very far. And I mean, whenever we have the chance, maybe in a different context, then I can show the recording of our Gandari Jakarta Modern Ensemble from last December, which was extremely impressive. You see, I'm still excited when I talk about it.
That is so wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, contemporary music really pushes performers to their limits. This without doubt. A lot of times the music is extremely it's complicated, and but I mean, it really shows how incredible the human spirit is, right? When you set
Absolutely.
a task. And what I love in your story is about when you talked about how everybody came out in their eyes, you know the determination. And it's not like, what is this music? Why am I doing this? It's not that. It's not the defeatist and like, I don't want to touch this, but like, I want to do this. And that's really special. That makes all the difference.
Absolutely. I mean, yes, I'm very sure some of the musicians, I mean, myself as well, we had our moments where like, oof, maybe that's a bit much, right? But I mean, no doubt, we look at the score. I mean, everybody who knows a little bit about music will agree that this is extremely difficult. So, and it would be extremely difficult for professional musicians all over the world to put this together. So you need rehearsal time for that.
Can I ask you guys how long? How you said over 6 months, and how long? How many rehearsals? Just a rough figure.
I think I had 24 sectional rehearsals. Not with each section, but in total. And then we had 2 weeks of rehearsals, like tutti rehearsals. Maybe another. Let's say in total we had probably 45 rehearsals or something like that. Wow. Everything together, yeah.
And that's not including like the rehearsals with the voice.
That's not including the soloist rehearsals
and the
only,
staging
but like
rehearsals and all that.
Yeah, that's including the staging rehearsals.
Okay.
That's including staging rehearsals, yeah. So probably we had 32 orchestra rehearsals somehow, tutti and sectional, and then we had stage rehearsals. That doesn't sound too much though when you think about it, no?
But I mean, in today's context, this is not like Wozzeck in 1920s or something. Yeah. Shall we listen to a second excerpt of this?
Yes, please.
And I'm gonna jump to.
Mereka menghendaki aku kematian. Mereka menghendaki aku.
That's really cool. That reminds me so much of Messiaen.
Yeah, very good that you mentioned that. It's so interesting when there's always this discussion about Asian composers and how should that sound and all that. What I find, I mean, in all fairness, I always find it very annoying when people say, "Oh, a composer from Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines, what has to sound Asian?" Like, what? Then I have to ask. Then a composer from Germany, France, Italy has to sound European. We see how stupid that is to think that way. And when you say Messiaen, it's exactly when you talk to Tony Prawobo. He talks about his influences, and he has many influences. He listened to rock music when he was a young boy. So, I mean, that plays a role as well. But it's true, Messiaen, boulez always play a very important role for him. And that's why you're absolutely right. I think we can hear this very much in this music. Although it's an own music, right? Own standing music.
Of course.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's also kind of, I guess, the impression of the sound impression that I get immediately when hearing it. I haven't heard this excerpt yet, so that was just something that just popped in my mind. And when you mentioned something sensual, because like at the first excerpt that when you mentioned it's very sensual music, and it didn't trigger that a romantic sensual part of me, but it was like, oh, I think I know what you're talking about. It's this sense of like love in Messiaen's music, where it's this kind of more visceral and more, I don't know, 3D or something. Yeah,
I mean, it's for me, it's always it's sort of like a lust for this whole thing. It's like it's a very this is a baroque style of not of music but of life. This is full on. It's not. The opera has very like super sensitive, very, very calm, very fragile moments as well, of course. But these passages, when we listen to them, it's always like whenever I coached them or conducted them or I performed them, I always got so hyped up because I think it's so beautiful. To me, it's just beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I can show some pictures of the production, because I mean I looked on the website and it just looks so beautiful. Let me just see if I can pull something up so we have an idea, because that looks so epic. I mean,
yeah.
I wanted to ask you, this is a question I forgot to ask. Like, how was the reception of the audience in your experiences in various countries? Because, for example, I would say like a full-on contemporary opera like this in Singapore would probably be a little problematic in some ways, just in terms of trying to sell and stuff. But looking at how beautiful this production is, let me do a quick share screen.
Yeah.
So I can see this. Can you see this?
I can see this. Yeah.
Yeah. This is pictures from the performance, right?
Yes. Correct. We had a great stage designer, light designer. The choreography by Melati Suryo Darmo. Max, prepare next time. That was just so breathtaking. So yeah, it was not just good music.
Yeah, like it makes me really want to go watch this. It's so powerful. I mean, look at the set. God, it's beautiful.
And this is very interesting. I mean, I know it's we talked about this before. It's just a 2 hours flight from Singapore. I mean, of course, I remember you were in Europe at the time, I think.
Yeah, I wish I was there. Absolutely.
But what I found really encouraging is that we had people flying in from Singapore. I mean, there was. I hope I don't forget anyone. If I forget, please excuse me. But there was definitely Keong Chong came.
Mm-hmm.
Peter Edwards came, Martin Yagi came from Singapore, and then we had my dear friend and former student Adam Sharawi came from Kuala Lumpur. But then there were Ali coming from Denpasar and Yadino Salim from Pontianak, which I mean this is also quite this is also 2 hours flight or so. So people came from all over the region to watch this production. And I think it says a lot about what I mentioned at the beginning, how the contemporary music scenes are connected here. Mm-hmm. People go to these festivals, these events, whenever there is a Soundways Festival in Kuala Lumpur, you have guests from all over Southeast Asia. People
Absolutely, yeah. A big
yeah.
shout out to Kyong for doing that wonderful festival.
Absolutely, yeah. Or then you also know, Sounding Now Festival, which unfortunately didn't happen this year because of the situation. Also, you have people coming and watching, even though they are not necessarily actively involved as a performer or composer, but they come and support. And this is very, people can be very optimistic about the contemporary music scene in Southeast Asia. There are challenges, but
of course, as also in Europe, there are challenges with this too. But exactly. I really feel like building a community around here was so valuable. And there's so much to learn. I remember listening to some of the Manila Composers Lab. They had a couple of talks like this also.
Yes.
And I was listening in, and I was really struck by how kind of Eurocentric, their music is, and they compose in a certain style, which is really quite unlike what I've heard in Singapore, which is great. There's such differences, and I'm sure Dieter's influences in the region, having. Yeah, I think that makes me so happy and so enthusiastic about finding out more. And I'm really grateful we can have this conversation, and I hope we can keep having this conversation in time to come. I just wanted to just look out at the comment section. I think we got too engrossed in the conversation that I forgot to look. I'm going back up.
I had to give a few hearts and hugs here.
Yeah.
It's so nice to see all the support from people here.
Yeah, Kyung says that Max knows how to party well, and that's the key for networking. And I remembered one of my mentors was telling me the most important part about any concert is the after party.
Correct.
That's where you meet people and you talk about ideas. That's really important. Now, Victor Yos and Nim, which you mentioned is a cellist for the group, says hi.
Neam.
Neam, sorry, I'm really bad with names. I apologize. Kyung mentioned something about Songkok.
I would like to skip that down.
Okay.
That's a little inside joke, but
okay.
It meant in a good spirit. The people. I got introduced to Tony Prawobo through Kyung, and we had a beautiful project there in 2016, which was very intense. We played some of Kyung's music, and that was a good group that we called the Songkok. And I think that's for that.
Okay. And I think that the last comment by Niam is really interesting. I laugh when I hear one of the excerpts that we played, our favorite part. Yeah. It was so intense that I could never forget the rhythm or the horror of the rehearsal. But that's something that is so unique to contemporary music, because sometimes it's so difficult that just based on doing it so many times, it's ingrained in your head. And I can remember like Dieter's piece, that section, it's in my head somewhere. I can pull it out just like that.
Yeah, and well, exactly. And there were a couple of these kind of sessions that Nea mentioned with the rhythm, and we started just counting, maybe conducting, a bit solfège, half tempo, and I think that I hope Neam that took the horror away. but I can understand. There are other passages also in the score that are extremely difficult, and when you look at it for the first time, you might think like, how do I count this? There is a
especially with an opera.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially with the length of the piece, it's not easy. Yeah, correct. Sorry to interrupt.
No. There's a wonderful thing in another part where you have a 4/20th bar. So I'm very sure some of the musicians don't even know what a 4/20th bar is. So what it is, you have 5 quintuplet semiquavers, and you have 4 of them, right? So you have, instead of da la pico la 1, you have da la pico boom. So and I remember that, when I first said, okay, let's have a look at this 4/20th bar, and everybody got like, not everybody, but most of them got like, what is he talking about? Mm-hmm. And then by the concertmaster Jason, who is a YST graduate.
Oh yes, Jason. Of
yeah,
course.
Jason was our concert master, and then he told me that this is like some code, like code for marijuana in the US, like a police code.
420.
I didn't know about that.
20th of April. It's a day.
It's a day.
Where yeah.
Oh, okay. But anyway, yeah, he told
People
me it's like a police code
weed.
thing or celebrate. Oh, yeah. So, and I was always like, hey, let's have a look at this 420th bar. And I was always wondering, like, why are some people laughing? Yeah.
Great. I think, time really flies when we're just having fun here. And, before we know it's an hour already. True. And I just wanted to ask you perhaps, how are things in Malaysia in terms of like performances and stuff like that? I'm just curious, how is it over there?
Well, at the moment there's nothing. Like we still can't have concerts. There are a few things, productions for the TV. So I don't know how that works, but I know well that we are not allowed to have any kind of performance still at the moment. So which is understandable. I think we all have to follow these kind of precaution
health guidelines, of course.
And health guidelines. On the other hand, I sometimes look at I look at my friends in Germany who slowly can play concerts again, and I have to say I have a little tear in my eye because I'm really looking forward to go back on stage again.
Right. It's really interesting how the whole world reacts to this situation, because I guess in some other parts of Asia, for example, I think China, and also in Korea, I think they started doing some concerts to some limited extent. In Taiwan, it was never a problem. And then in Europe, especially in Germany, it's really starting to go back up. But in the States, it's really not quite the same situation.
No, it's very different. That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, again, we I'm a musician, so I'm not a doctor or do you call it virologist? Is that how you call it in English? Virologe in German.
Virologe,
Virologe, yeah. I mean, so who am I to judge, right? I just follow what the experts say.
Right, of course.
And that's all I can, and I can practice at home. So.
But I guess, in these situations, I mean, it also gives birth to a lot of different opportunities.
True.
And something like, you had a few videos on your YouTube channel about teaching online. That's really, really wonderful, talking about kind of different forms of learning. And this is, it used to be something that is done not so frequently, and now this is the norm. This is a real generational shift.
Yeah,
one may say.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we can take from that is that all this online teaching thing is a great tool that we can use for certain situations. What it shouldn't be, of course, I think we all agree. What it can't do, it can't replace the what do you call that? Like the contact teaching.
Face to face, right?
Face to face, it can't. But it is another option. And I think at the moment we have to mostly. That's understandable. And once the situation has been, I don't know, is back to normal, however you want to call that, then I think we all will appreciate much more the contact with like the teaching in contact in teaching situations. But also we know what this online thing also can help as an add-on. I mean, it's great when a student has a problem practicing, has a problem, can quickly record that, send that to you, and you can give a comment that might help the student with not learning mistakes or things like that.
Absolutely.
So, right, I think there are advantages, but we have to use them wisely.
Great. So as we approach the end of today's episode, I think Septian, I just want to give another shot at just pronouncing his name right. So Septian Dwi Cahyo.
Septian Dwi. It's like Dwi. Yes.
And he posted a link about Indonesian composers that I think it's really interesting. I'm just going to pin this comment up. So anybody?
Yes, please. I think it's one of his articles.
You can check that out. Jianhan has a question.
Yes, saw that.
How do you practice for pieces with a multi-percussion setup at home?
Very good question. I have a few instruments at home, but of course I don't have like Septian's piece, for example. I don't have all the instruments at home. So if I would need to practice this at the moment, I would replace a few instruments, such as I have these metal pots that you can get, when you go and have
the silver
Indian
ones.
food, the silver ones. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I use them, for example. I use them at the moment. I'm still working at Peter Edwards' Irama Mabuk for 25 Almglocken, and so I can't carry 25 Almglocken with me, but I have 25 of these metal pots. So replacement of instruments, so that you at least can learn the piece, And then, of course, later when we have to talk about sound, then at one point I have to go somewhere where the real instruments are. Yeah, but there are always ways to practice. Also, practicing without instrument is an extremely important thing for me. Or, as I just practice with the score, and then I memorize, and then I really, really do like this very slowly, so that I know from here I have to go there, and then I have to do this melody change here, and so on. This is very important work then for later on.
And we can do a whole episode on practicing.
It's true,
and
yeah.
I mean, practicing without the instrument is such an important thing that I've never done enough when I was a student, because I was always thinking about it has to be on my chops. I have to do it. And I start to realize the more I think, the better I am. And that's why I became a conductor.
No, but you're absolutely right. And as a percussionist, you are at the conservatory where all these great instruments are. So of course you have to make use of that. You want to, but you're right. We sometimes forget this thing, of practicing without instruments.
Mm-hmm. So and really thinking.
Yeah.
Great. So before we end, I'd just like to ask if you have any upcoming projects or things or upcoming videos that we should watch out for.
Unfortunately, not upcoming. I was in the middle of recording my solo album when this whole MCO thing, or in Singapore it's called the circuit breaker, kicked in. You should check out my YouTube channel, I think. Of course.
Yes. There's so many performances of you there. It's wonderful.
Yeah,
it's a great resource.
Yeah. And then, but also, I mean, what Septian posted is good. And then there is the Indonesian Composers Collective. Septian, if I'm wrong, please write this down here. I think it's Indonesian Composers Collective. They recently keep uploading a lot of pieces that are very interesting. And it's like this young generation, like Septian's gang, so to say. I think this is something definitely worth looking at. And then if you do that, then you have enough material for a lot of evenings of good music. I think this is the one YouTube channel I would recommend. And then whenever something new comes up, how these influencers say, like, what, click the like button or press the bell or something like that.
yeah those YouTube
yeah
absolutely. Kyung has a quick comment. Conductors should start conducting without musicians. Peter Edwards taught us. Yeah, absolutely. I always talk about how important it is to be able to sing what you want to conduct. And it really comes from you first before you stand in front of musicians and trying to tell them what to do, that you need to know exactly what needs to be done on the preparation, self-preparation. So,
and musicians, let me just add to that. Musicians are mean, right? Performers are mean. They know very well the moment a conductor does not 100% know what the conductor wants to say. They sense this, or they know every single percent. So you, as a conductor, you really have to know what you're doing.
Especially in contemporary music, where the rhythms are not easy, and you cannot sight read them. Trust me. Great. Well, thank you so much, Max, for spending an hour with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's been a really great conversation, and I hope we can dive deeper into the region and see so many new, kind of the whole community coming together. I think that's really exciting.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
And thank you to all our audience for tuning in. next week we have Li Xiaoan, who will be talking to us about video games and games for music for new media. So I think that's a really kind of refreshing change for this month. And I'll also be announcing what's up in August for unboxing new music. We have a whole new lineup, and it's really exciting, and I'm really looking forward to that. So thank you again, and have a good night.
Thank
See
you,
you.
Boon Hua.
Bye-bye.